A student had gone to sleep in her room. When only minutes later a fire erupted. As firefighters rushed inside, something immediately felt off. Police were brought in and detectives began assembling a trail of disturbing clues and witness accounts. What they eventually uncovered was a grim and complicated truth that left everyone deeply rattled. Andrea Del Visco was born on June 29, 1994 in Chicago, Illinois. She grew up with an older brother, a younger sister, and her parents. She was exceptionally close to her siblings, and she came from a financially comfortable family. Her father ran an investment firm, and after her younger sister was born, the family relocated to Austin, Texas. Andrea enrolled in an elite Christian school, where she quickly made a strong impression. She played on both the field hockey and lacrosse teams and collected numerous awards, especially for her achievements in languages like Spanish and Latin. After graduating, Andrea applied to several top-tier colleges. She ultimately chose UCLA, where she planned to pursue degrees in psychology and Spanish. Her love for the language was so strong that she seriously considered moving to a Spanish-speaking country in the future. Her parents had hoped she would stay in Chicago for university since her older brother was studying there and they could keep a closer watch on her. Still, they supported her decision, and she set off for California. During her first week on campus, she joined a sorority and quickly formed a close circle of friends. Andrea moved into the dorms with them and spent the next few years dedicating herself to her studies. She also took on part-time jobs whenever she could. Even though her family could easily support her, she wanted to contribute on her own. In 2015, at 21 years old, Andrea entered her senior year at UCLA. Seniors in sororities and fraternities were allowed to rent small apartment-style units just off campus. A privilege seen as a major milestone, offering both status and a taste of independence outside the dorms. Andrea and her sorority friends seized the chance and leased a place just a short walk from campus. Around that same time, she adopted a small chihuahua from a shelter. And before long, she began volunteering there regularly. September was a particularly significant month for her sorority as it marked recruitment season, the time when they welcomed new freshmen into the house. Andrea and her friends were hard at work preparing for recruitment. On the night of September 20th, they spent hours setting up displays, painting posters, creating decorations, and making sure everything was ready for the big day. As the night grew late, the girls began drifting off to their rooms one after another. Andrea stayed up with a friend in the living room, chatting until about 3:30 a.m. She eventually drifted asleep on the couch, but woke up a short time later and headed to her bedroom. A few hours after that, Andrea's roommate, who lived upstairs, was jolted awake by the sound of a woman screaming and a dog barking. The noise seemed to be coming from downstairs. So, she tried calling Andrea, but her calls went unanswered. Worried, she called the police and Officers arrived within minutes. By the time they entered the building, everything had fallen silent. They walked through the apartment but found no signs of forced entry or anything out of the ordinary. Most of the other girls were still sleeping, so the officers decided not to wake them, assuming it might have been a bad dream or something harmless. They left. But only a few minutes later, Andrea's roommate heard a loud crash from downstairs. She hurried onto her balcony and saw smoke pouring from Andrea's room, quickly followed by flames spreading at an alarming rate. To her shock, she also spotted a man wrapped in a blanket running out of Andrea's room. Just then, the fire alarms blared to life, and the students began evacuating the building. Some of Andrea's friends tried to get into her room, but the door was locked. A strange detail, since the girls never locked their doors. Using a spare key, they finally managed to open it. Inside, the room was engulfed in smoke and flames. Through the thick haze, they could just make out the shape of someone lying motionless on the bed. They called out Andrea's name, but there was no response. The fire was spreading too fast, forcing them to retreat. By the time firefighters arrived, the scene was chaotic. Students gathered outside, and it quickly became clear that Andrea was unaccounted for. The flames swept rapidly through the building, and it took 32 firefighters more than 15 minutes to fully extinguish the blaze. When firefighters were finally able to enter Andrea's room, they discovered a body lying on the bed. Police were called in right away. The fire had caused so much destruction that the body couldn't be visually identified, so it was sent to the medical examiner. Still, detectives quickly understood who it likely was. Other students told them the room belonged to Andrea, and she was the only one who hadn't made it out that night. Firefighters also found Andrea's Chihuahua alive in the room, and the dog was rushed to a veterinary clinic for care. Although official identification would take time, news of the tragedy spread across campus almost immediately. Within hours, thousands of UCLA students had heard what happened, and most assumed Andrea had died in some kind of accident. Maybe an electrical malfunction or a candle left burning. But firefighters were skeptical from the start. All the electrical outlets were untouched, and there was no indication of an accidental fire anywhere in the room. What they did find, however, was unusual. A trash can was sitting on the bed right beside the body, an odd and troubling detail. After examining it more closely, they determined the fire had originated inside the trash can, meaning someone had placed it on the bed and intentionally set it ablaze. It was almost unthinkable that Andrea would have done that to herself. Firefighters relayed their observations to the police, and soon forensic investigators were combing through the room. What they uncovered made the situation even more disturbing. Large blood stains were found across the bed and on the floor. That single detail destroyed any possibility of an accidental fire. Because in a genuine accident, there would have been no reason for blood to be present at all. Meanwhile, medical Examiners worked to determine the victim's identity, but the fire had been so severe that even her fingerprints were destroyed. Ultimately, they confirmed it was Andrea through her dental records. What they uncovered next was devastating. Her body showed 19 stab wounds, eliminating any chance that this had been an accident. There was another critical finding. Examiners detected no smoke in her lungs, indicating Andrea had already died before the fire was set. As for assault, there were no definitive signs, but the extensive burn damage made it impossible to be certain. One thing they could say for sure was that no trace of the attacker's DNA remained. The case was now officially being treated as a homicide. Detectives began questioning all the sorority members living in the complex. They learned that Andrea didn't have a boyfriend at the time and didn't appear to have any conflicts with anyone. One student, the same one who had called the police before the fire, revealed a troubling detail. That night, she had driven her boyfriend to the airport and returned home around 5:30 a.m. She walked into the courtyard of the sorority house where the stairs led up to her room. As she climbed the steps and started unlocking her door, she suddenly heard a noise behind her. When she turned, she saw a man standing at the bottom of the stairs. The moment he realized she had noticed him, he ran off. Terrified, she quickly went inside and locked herself in her room. She considered calling the police, but ultimately talked herself out of it. Maybe he was visiting another girl in the building, she thought, or just another student passing through. She hadn't seen his face clearly, but she remembered his clothing. A black baseball cap, a dark t-shirt, and jeans. Still uneasy, she called her boyfriend and told him what had happened. He reassured her, and eventually she fell asleep. But just 45 minutes later, she was awakened by commotion coming from downstairs. The same noise that had made her call the police earlier. After the officers left, she heard more sounds. Stepping out onto her balcony, she saw a man climbing out of Andrea's window, wrapped in a red blanket. She immediately recognized him as the same person she had seen at the bottom of the stairs less than an hour before. She shouted after him, but he took off running. She rushed outside hoping to catch a glimpse of where he went, but he had already disappeared. What she did notice, however, was a red Nissan driving away from the area. She couldn't make out the license plate, but something on the rear windshield caught her eye. 3 large letters she recognized immediately. They were the initials of a fraternity called Lambda Alpha. Detectives were intrigued by the lead, but remained cautious. The neighborhood was densely packed with students and well known for large parties, so the red Nissan could have belonged to any random college student heading home. Still, investigators pursued the tip, questioning every member of Lambda Alpha, the fraternity whose letters had been seen on the car. None of the fraternity members admitted to owning a red Nissan, nor did they know who it belonged to. Detectives then Spoke with students living in the complex across the street from Andrea's. And that's when they uncovered another crime from that same night. According to the students, their apartment had been burglarized with a laptop, a Bluetooth speaker, and several other items stolen. This caught the investigators' attention. They soon realized that to use the stolen Bluetooth speaker, the new owner would have to register it online through the manufacturer's website. Acting quickly, detectives contacted the company, provided the serial number, and requested to be notified the moment someone attempted to activate it. While they waited for a response, news of Andrea's death spread well beyond the UCLA campus. At first, investigators did not disclose that Andrea's death was a homicide. Most people, including her own family, believed she had died in a tragic accident. Her parents only learned the grim reality later from Andrea's sorority sisters. By that time, they had already flown to Los Angeles, and her mother insisted on seeing Andrea's body herself, unable to accept that she was truly gone. As for Andrea's dog, veterinarians tried desperately to save the little chihuahua, but it did not survive. Heartbroken, her parents visited the clinic to say their goodbyes, later taking comfort in the thought that the dog would now be reunited with Andrea in heaven. Meanwhile, detectives continued pursuing the lead on the red Nissan, but came up empty. Days passed with no breakthrough, until the call finally arrived. The stolen Bluetooth speaker had just been activated, giving detectives an IP address that traced back to a man named Joseph living in Fresno, roughly 3 hours from UCLA. Police went straight to his home, where Joseph admitted he had registered the speaker online but insisted it wasn't his, claiming it belonged to his roommate, a man named Alberto. Joseph explained that Alberto had traveled to Los Angeles a few days earlier to attend a concert and returned on September 22, just 1 day after Andrea's murder. When he came back, he was carrying the stolen Bluetooth speaker along with various other items, including dishes, towels, and bottles of alcohol. When questioned about their origin, Alberto claimed a friend in Los Angeles had recently moved and had given him the items he didn't want to take alone. Detectives dug deeper and learned that Alberto was a 22-year-old student at Fresno State University with no prior criminal record. His exact whereabouts, however, were uncertain, and it took investigators several days to locate the house where he was staying. On September 26, officers surrounded the residence and arrested him at the station. Alberto claimed he had traveled to Los Angeles to visit a friend who lived near UCLA. He explained that they had attended a concert together and then spent the next few days going from party to party before he returned home. When a detective questioned him about the Bluetooth speaker, Alberto initially feigned ignorance. However, once confronted with proof that the stolen speaker had been found in his roommate's home, his story began to change. Now, Alberto claimed that the speaker had actually been brought by his friend from Los Angeles, who supposedly gave him a ride back to Fresno. But detectives quickly spotted a major inconsistency. His roommate revealed that he had seen Alberto return home alone, carrying the speaker and the rest of the stolen items into the garage. Cornered by this evidence, Alberto changed his story once more. This time, he admitted that he had stolen the items himself. He explained that he and his friend had attended a student party that night where some people were behaving rudely, drunk, and irritating. In a drunken attempt to teach them a lesson, he decided to take their belongings, the laptop, the speaker, and anything else he could grab. He insisted he had been so intoxicated that he barely understood what he was doing. Alberto added another detail. He claimed that around 5:30 a.m. after leaving the party, he and his friend had been confronted by a man hiding behind a dumpster. The man allegedly pulled out a gun and demanded their belongings. Instead of complying, they ran and the stranger fired a shot in their direction. When detectives asked for a description of the gunman, Alberto's account matched exactly what Andrea's neighbor had reported seeing that same night. However, detectives were skeptical of Alberto's story, particularly since no neighbors had reported hearing gunshots that morning. They pressed him further, asking whether he had entered any women's dorms while in Los Angeles. Alberto admitted he had met 2 students through a mutual friend, but insisted that was all. Under increasing pressure, detectives told him they didn't believe any part of his story. Alberto changed his story once more. This time, he claimed that during the same party where he had stolen the speaker, his friend Eric had met a girl living just across the street and decided to go with her. Alberto said he didn't know her name, but when he provided a description, it matched Andrea. He went even further, describing what she had been wearing that night, down to her underwear, and eventually slipped, saying her name aloud. Detectives recognized that he was likely fabricating his story as he went along. But they also knew they needed every possible detail. When pressed to elaborate, Alberto put his head in his hands and went silent for a few moments, before finally muttering, "All right, it was Eric." According to Alberto, just minutes after Eric left with the girl, he returned visibly shaken. Alberto said that Eric had told him they needed to leave immediately because he had done something serious. According to Alberto, Eric admitted he had attacked the girl, and the 2 of them left the party together. As they left, Eric discarded a pair of rubber gloves, the ones he had been wearing when he came out of the student's house. Later, Alberto claimed he saw news of Andrea's murder and realized what his friend had done. He messaged Eric demanding the truth, and Eric supposedly confessed to killing her. Detectives remained skeptical of Alberto's inconsistent story, but they had to follow the lead. They asked where Eric lived, and Alberto directed them to an apartment complex just 5 minutes from Andrea's place. Police went to Eric's door and began questioning him about that night. Eric admitted that he and Alberto had attended the party, but insisted that nothing out of the ordinary had happened. He claimed they returned to his apartment around 3 a.m. and he didn't wake up until closer to 8 He also said he had been extremely drunk, making his memory of the night unclear. Despite continued questioning, Eric stuck firmly to his story. Then, police noticed a crucial detail. Eric's apartment complex was equipped with surveillance cameras. So, investigators immediately reviewed footage from the night of Andrea's murder. What they saw contradicted both men's accounts. The footage showed Alberto and Eric returning to the building at 2:40 a.m. And detectives immediately noticed something significant. One of them was wearing a black baseball cap, a dark t-shirt, and jeans. The exact outfit Andrea's neighbor had described, and it wasn't Eric, it was Alberto. Later, footage showed both men leaving the apartment again around 4:30 a.m. They went downstairs, hung around drinking for a while, and then disappeared from the camera's view. The next time they appeared on footage was that morning at a 7-Eleven, returning home. There was no mistaking it. Alberto was wrapped in the same red blanket that Andrea's sorority sister had seen the man wearing as he fled her balcony. By this point, detectives were almost certain of Alberto's involvement. But they still needed to determine Eric's role, if any. They brought him in for further questioning and showed him the surveillance footage, pressing him to tell the truth. Yet, Eric remained consistent with his previous account, insisting he had been so drunk that he barely remembered anything, including leaving the apartment or where they had gone. Even so, investigators now had enough evidence to arrest both men and obtain search warrants for their homes. When they were booked into jail, officers noticed something concerning. Alberto's hands were covered in scratches. They resembled defensive wounds. Marks someone might leave while trying to fight him off. When questioned, Alberto dismissed it, claiming he had gotten into a fight at a party, but couldn't remember with whom. Shortly after, forensic teams searched Eric's apartment and discovered stains that appeared to be attempts to wash away blood. They quickly sent samples to the lab for testing. Detectives then tracked down Alberto's car, the red Nissan with fraternity letters on the back window. It turned out Alberto had once been a member of Lambda Chi Alpha, but not at UCLA. He had previously been part of a Lambda Chi Alpha chapter in Fresno, but had been expelled for bad behavior. Finally, police searched Alberto's home, and what they discovered left no doubt. Inside a trash bag were the red blanket seen by Andrea's neighbor, a bloody knife, and Alberto's clothing, including his underwear. Even more disturbing, the bag also contained a pair of women's underwear. All of the evidence was sent to the lab for testing. Meanwhile, one of Alberto's neighbors came forward with a detail that immediately drew detectives' attention. He said that when Alberto returned from Los Angeles, he mentioned that a student had been murdered right across the street from where he had been at a party. What made this striking wasn't just that Alberto knew about the killing. According to the neighbor, it was the level of detail that was most alarming. Alberto described the crime scene with graphic precision. The victim had been assaulted, stabbed, and the house set on fire to destroy evidence. None of these details had ever been made public. He even boasted that the police would never catch the perpetrator, claiming the crime had been executed too cleanly. Detectives strongly disagreed and continued to dig into the mounting evidence against him. When forensics finished analyzing Alberto's car, it too was found to be covered in blood. Samples from the vehicle, the knife, and Alberto's clothing all matched, confirming the blood belonged to Andrea. With that evidence in hand, prosecutors moved forward, formally charging both Alberto and Eric with murder. Detectives, however, remained unconvinced that Eric had played an active role in the crime. Eric might not have even known what his friend had done. But with the evidence linking both men to the scene, authorities had little choice but to charge him alongside Alberto. After their arrests made the news, a new witness came forward. He told police that around 5:30 a.m. he had been outside near Andrea's house, collecting plastic bottles. According to the witness, a man approached him and asked if he knew how to fight. When the witness said no, the man walked directly toward Andrea's building. The witness also noticed a red Nissan parked nearby, with someone inside. When detectives brought him in for questioning, he immediately identified the man who had approached him. It was Alberto. This testimony became a crucial piece of the investigation. The testimony showed that Alberto had been the one approaching Andrea's home while Eric remained in the car, making Eric's direct involvement in the murder appear far less likely. Investigators began to believe that Eric might truly have had no knowledge of what his friend intended to do. Eventually, prosecutors reduced Eric's charges. He now faced counts of aiding and abetting along with burglary from the other house that night. In 2017, Eric's lawyer negotiated a deal. The prosecution agreed to try him separately from Alberto. Eric pleaded guilty to the lesser charges and was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months in prison. Alberto's trial began in 2018, and by that time, prosecutors had added an additional charge of animal cruelty, citing the death of Andrea's dog. The prosecution presented a case that was both extensive and compelling against him. Prosecutors argued that Alberto had entered Andrea's home via the balcony. At first, he may not have intended to kill her. Perhaps he had only planned to steal something valuable. But when Andrea woke up and screamed, prosecutors said he drew a knife, attacked her, and stabbed her repeatedly. Afterward, he set a trash can on fire to destroy evidence, grabbed a blanket, and fled the scene. If you found this case fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We post crime case videos every night. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant.